Welcome back to The Line. We have a great panel this week, and I want to know what you guys all think about all this attention that's out there right now. Tom, Marcia, and Sophie, about entrepreneurship. And Sophie, I'll start with you. No one could argue the idea that we need more entrepreneurs here because we know the benefits that will come. It's the how we're getting there. And given some of the things we've covered here with our entrepreneurial series, what's your sense of where we are right now in this understanding of how important entrepreneurship is citywide? Are we getting it at this point?
I mean, I think there's actually been sort of a long-term conversation about the importance of entrepreneurship in New Mexico, especially in light of the fact that we have so many small businesses here, so many family-owned businesses. New Mexico, you know, that's been our profile for quite some time. Like the big players, Sandia and Los Alamos, and then these many smaller businesses. Right. I wonder a little bit if too this isn't a little like, well, the big jobs are not coming, so here's our other option, because we're not pulling in big companies that are going to provide a lot of jobs, so maybe we can grow them. I do think it's important, and I'm pleased to see all the work that UNM, CNM, and other sort of educational entities, nonprofits are doing to help people to train to become entrepreneurs. Because I think there's a real, there's this fallacy that an entrepreneur sort of emerges whole from their parents' garage, ready to create a million jobs, and
all
those
at 19,
are, right, and those are relatively few people who actually do that. What we know of successful entrepreneurs is that they often fail at their first few businesses. They require mentorship, they require training, and the nice thing about the university or college environment is that it does give them a place where they can fail, receive feedback, work through it, get a better product or a better business. And I think that our focus on that right now is really healthy.
Interesting. Tom, you're, of course, a longtime entrepreneur and business owner. Can the values of entrepreneurship be taught in the classroom, in your view?
You know, no. Okay. And I hate to shatter people's dreams and say, I think you're either born an entrepreneur or you have the passion for it.
Right.
But it's like writing. You know, we're all journalists and reporters and writers and so on. Neither you have writing or you don't. You can teach how to write a specific style. But, you know, so those the short answer. But what I like is that there are the programs like, you know, Fat Pipe. I think Gary Opedal, a big fan of his. And I think that they've done really a good job in setting up an area where those types of passionate entrepreneurs have a place to succeed. But even to Gary's comments a couple of weeks ago, along the lines of that it's just one aspect.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of different other aspects of our economy right now. It just seems the popular thing to talk about is the entrepreneur and the .com or whatever that dot version is here now, and it's having some success. But even when we look at Boulder, it was a 10-20 year process.
Very good point.
And a lot of people in our ready-made instant society cannot wait. That's right. But I'll tell you, with tech, you gotta wait.
That's a very good point there about Boulder. As a matter of fact, it didn't happen just overnight. Marcia, interestingly, we'd have to give the mayor and city staff a little credit here by saying this is basically a 20-year situation. You can't, as Tom just said, you can't throw seeds in the ground and expect something, a year later. So, but that being said, it has to be the right foundation, doesn't it, in order for things to outlast administrations. So that's what I worry about. This guy has an idea, and this other woman comes in, she's got her own ideas. Do you know what I mean? And we get no flow for those 20 years.
Right, and I think that, again, this goes into talking about education. There's great programs happening at UNM and at CNM. But interestingly enough, what happens before our students are getting to university and to college? There was a great article this summer that Winthrop Quigley wrote, and he started talking about a brand new tech charter school, where they're trying to bridge the gap between what kids are learning in school to what business owners actually need in the marketplace. Right. Now, what I keep trying to figure out is why is it that a select few students are now being taught critical thinking, problem solving, when the rest of our students are being taught to pass a standardized test.
Interesting.
So now if we have local business owners telling directors of schools what we need are critical thinkers, we need problem solvers, this is what we need in the workplace. Yet our public school system is being forced to teach around a test. So I think that, again, if we're going to try to have this really firm foundation to ensure that our economy starts growing and starts moving in the right direction, we've got to start investing in our kids. They need to be the workers that business owners want to hire.
Is entrepreneurship part of that teaching at a young age, in your view? Is that something about 7th, 8th grade let me put it this way. What would happen if for the next 10 years we in fact did an entrepreneurial track at about that age group or that class citywide for 20 years? Would that make a marked difference in your view?
You know, what's interesting is that a lot of the folks that are talking about entrepreneurship, they're talking about teaching students skills that go beyond just business, right? They're talking about learning how to collaborate, learning how to be leaders, learning how to think outside of the box.
Right.
Now, should that start in 7th grade? Should that start in preschool? Should that start in kindergarten?
Sure.
You know, these are things that people can learn these skills at a young age, but keep adding to it and keep growing this foundation. But again, we've got to look at where are most kids at? They're at public school. What is our public school system being forced to do? They're teaching a standardized test. They're not teaching collaboration. They're not teaching leadership or critical thinking and problem solving.
Good point.
You know, one of the items that I heard in the segment that just ran is the fact that they're teaching them a lot of different things of how to run a business, except the financial part, the financial aspect. I mean, you know, there's the book smarts and there's street smarts, but where's the financial aspect? That was the one thing that really bothered me, was that, you know, for an entrepreneur, I think to be successful, you have to fail. I mean, gosh, I've failed a number of different times, and I lost money as a result, and that stung. What bothers me is that, not that it has to sting or anything like that, but there's no reality of the real, what a dollar is and how long it takes to make $1,000 or $100 to sell a product. And I'm not convinced that that kind of reality is being you know, instilled in the entrepreneurial kind of leadership classes that are being offered.
That's a very interesting point. So, you know, going back to the kid thing for a second, it's almost like the lemonade stand theory. You have a kid at 10 years old, lemonade stand, and they kind of move pennies around in dimes and nickels. However, some huge seeds may be being planted for later in life just for having to have the experience of running a sidewalk business. You see what I mean?
I do. I think one of the challenges, and this isn't to say that we shouldn't be working toward this, but one of the challenges is the kid with the lemonade stand, they do better when there's a parent behind them who's like mentoring them, helping them, not doing it for them.
That's right.
But talking through it, perhaps providing some seed money, doing all of those things. And at that young age, there are so many kids. How do we manage to provide that kind of mentorship, that kind of one-on-one help that those kids get often from coming from an advantaged background, from having parents who have the time and the ability to put that and the money to put into those projects.
That's right.
We do have some things that go on in the schools, of course, already that would help to encourage entrepreneurship. I mean, I think the science competitions can be an incredible place for that to start, and we see that all the time with kids who come out with really interesting science projects that are able then to become businesses. They're getting the kind of hands-on help often that more kids might need.
Marcia, is someone being left out of this equation? Are there certain kids that are, you know, given Sophie's point, or even not even kids, but even grown adults? Are there some grown adults populations being left out of this conversation right now?
You know, I mean, I think that definitely a lot of the programs that the city has been offering when it comes to entrepreneurship, they're positive programs. These are good conversations to start with, but at some point we need to take it past a conversation. I mean, for example, look at the Living Cities Initiative. That's a great program that was made to reach out to our immigrant small business owners. And it's exciting that they've been brought to the table, but you know, well over a year now, they have identified the needs that these small business owners need. You know, they need more access to capital, they need networking.
That's right.
They need the mentorship program so that they can have all the appropriate steps and have somebody help them to ensure that they are running a business in the appropriate way. But again, these are great positive conversations, but how do we move past the conversation and we actually see some action and some resources given to these types of communities, these small business owners that, you know, are opening businesses in areas that other folks might not pay attention to, that maybe not as much outreach is moving into those areas. So it has to be more than just bringing people to the table. It's got to be creating some action.
That's a good point. Tom, one of the populations that excites me when I think about entrepreneurship is a group that you and I would fit in, the over 50 crowd, people that have done a little, you know, not that far over 50, just a little bit over.
That's right.
They've done a lot of things in life. They've got some life experience. They're braver. They've faced a lot of things in life in their own field. And these people are almost wired to be entrepreneurs because they can handle the frictions, the losses, the gains, the triumphs, the failures. Would you agree with that? I think it makes sense to me when I think about it.
You know, absolutely. You know, I think, you know, there's a certain level in some areas, maturity. There's definitely a little bit more financial wherewithal to kind of, you know, be that parent behind, you know, the kid in the lemonade stand to help them to be successful. So, you know, I'm seeing a lot of that actually starting to take place, which is really encouraging. What I like most about this conversation, though, is that it's a conversation of how do we support small business. It's not how do we attract the big smokestacks to the state, which is a conversation that needs to be had, but how are we helping, you know, the mom and pop, the person who has a dream, how are we helping them to make that dream a reality? And there are a lot of different organizations, whether it be West or the New Mexico Small Business Development.
Axion.
And that's the cool thing is that it's not just technology, which is getting a lot of the great, you know, props right now, but there's so many different other resources. And I think, you know, to Marcia's point, we quantify it by talking about not necessarily how many jobs are generated as a result of somebody going to seek help from an NMSBDC or from West, but how, you know, how do we gauge their level of profitability from the perspective of longevity?
That's right.
You know, are they here 5 months, 5 years? And what are the things that they're actually learned in those one-on-one sessions?
Interesting point. Sophie, one of the things I hear about a lot from folks is I want to be in business, I have a product, an idea, I have, you know, but I can't hack the real estate. I cannot hack the real estate costs here. You see all these empty storefronts, particularly downtown, other parts of Albuquerque, and it's tough to get in a brick and mortar business. And can it be necessarily, can the gap be filled by other types of businesses? We see food trucks replacing restaurants, so to speak, as a choice.
It's a good
people
question.
working at home, that kind of thing.
We certainly did see, coming out of the food truck movement, for lack of a better way to put it, some companies like Boiler Monkey ended up in a bricks and mortar store once they had a space, once they had enough cash, I think, and enough customers. But I think, you know, real estate's just one part, and I'm actually kind of impressed with us. I'm going to break through that, though. I'm impressed with that we haven't yet talked about taxes, which is the usual thing that people rail about, like, oh, it's too hard for small businesses to get going because of taxes. But the truth is, I think these issues like real estate talent, capital are much more pressing issues for entrepreneurs in this state, in this community. You may not get to put your business downtown. You may have to put it somewhere else, and that opens up other parts of the city that frankly need you, right? That need your business. And I think that the success, for instance, of the Rail Yards Market and what's going on along the rail yard line is a nice sign of what can happen there.
That's right. Great example. Thank you all for being here this week. Good stuff.